At precisely 5:32 a.m., local time in the Persian Gulf, a curtain of electronic static ripped across the airwaves the opening move in what Tehran believed would be a crippling blow to American drone operations. Iranian electronic warfare trucks lit up the horizon, flooding frequencies with brutal jamming signals. Their target, a US Navy controlled swarm of MQ-25 Stingray refueling drones, linked to a wave of Switchblade loitering munitions poised just miles from Iranian waters. But within 180 seconds, the impossible happened. Instead of faltering, the swarm accelerated. Counter-jamming algorithms sliced through the interference like a blade through silk, turning Iran's most guarded electronic warfare secret into a flashing beacon for American targeting systems. How did the US Navy turn an ambush into a flawless victory, and what hidden technology made it possible? If you want the untold truth behind this, stay tuned, subscribe, and tell us what you think below. Only a handful of defense analysts had predicted it, and fewer still believed it could happen so fast. The Persian Gulf, that narrow artery of global oil supply, was now a chessboard where milliseconds determined supremacy. Iran's cyber and signal warfare units had trained for years to cripple American drone networks, convinced that a swarm could be blinded long enough for missile boats to strike. But on this morning, the stakes were far higher. Carrier Strike Group 9, led by the USS Theodore Roosevelt, was moving within operational range. Every drone in the swarm was a lifeline, fueling reconnaissance jets and guiding strike packages. One wrong move, one signal lost, and the balance of power in the Gulf could shift forever. The first warning arrived not from radar, but from the hum of electromagnetic interference picked up by the USS Theodore Roosevelt's Combat Information Center. At exactly 5:32 a.m., spectrum monitors flared red with cascading alerts Iran's jammers were active. Within seconds, the U.S. Navy's battle network detected concentrated interference aimed at the MQ-25 Stingray refueling drones, operating 40 nautical miles ahead of the carrier. These Stingrays were more than refuelers. They were the bloodstream of the battle group's aerial power. Without them, the F/A-18 Super Hornets and E-2D Advanced Hawkeyes on station would be forced back to the carrier prematurely, blinding the task force's forward eyes. And Iran knew it. The jamming came from three locations: a mobile truck, mounted system on Qeshm Island, a hardened facility near Bandar Abbas, and a naval corvette bristling with electronic warfare antennas in international waters. Their beams converged into an overlapping cone of disruption, a carefully calculated trap designed to sever the swarm's data links. But the U.S. Navy had anticipated this move months earlier. Under a classified program codenamed Specter Shield, engineers from DARPA and the Naval Air Systems Command had integrated next-generation counterjamming suites into every MQ-25. The moment the interference hit, each drone's onboard processor switched to a decentralized mesh protocol, allowing them to communicate with one another even if direct links to the carrier were momentarily degraded. By 5:33 a.m. and 20 seconds, the swarm had already pivoted. Switchblade loitering munitions, tucked beneath the Stingray's wings, were released in microbursts, small groups peeling away, flying low across the wavetops to avoid detection. These loitering drones were not the primary strike, but the scalpel tasked with locating and fixing the jamming sources for follow-on suppression. On the carrier's flag bridge, Rear Admiral James Harlan watched the tactical plot with icy focus. "Mark their emitters," he ordered. "Do not fire yet. Let them think they have us." In the Persian Gulf, perception was as deadly as firepower. If Iran believed their jamming was succeeding, they might commit fast attack craft into the area, exposing them to the full weight of the strike group. If they realized the swarm was unaffected too soon, they could shut down the emitters and vanish back into the clutter of the Gulf's fishing and tanker traffic. At 5:34 a.m., the Switchblades closed in. One unit skimmed the coast of Qeshm Island, its nose camera relaying infrared footage of a truck-mounted jammer hidden beneath camouflage netting. Two operators in fatigues moved in the shadows, unaware that their position had been tagged and shared to every asset in the battlespace. Meanwhile, the naval corvette Iran's Mauj-class warship increased speed, attempting to reposition behind a cluster of civilian dhows. The Stingrays responded by splitting their formation, two peeling south to maintain overwatch, while others angled toward the carrier for a mid-mission fuel relay. The mesh network never broke. Even under maximum jamming power, the drones relayed data through multiple redundant nodes. By 5:35 a.m. and 40 seconds, the US Navy unleashed the second phase, counter-electronic attack. From the deck of the guided missile destroyer USS Thomas Hudner, a high-gain directional antenna locked onto the Iranian emitters, transmitting a burst of frequency-agile noise. To untrained ears, it was just static, but to Iran's systems, it was a chaos storm, overwhelming their receivers and forcing them to recalibrate. The result was immediate. Iranian jammers sputtered, some shifting frequency, others shutting down momentarily. The mesh swarm seized the opening. Switchblades dove in, exploding in precise arcs of flame that knocked the truck on Keshem Island out of operation. But this was no clean victory, not yet. The hardened facility near Bandar Abbas remained active, and with the corvette still jamming, Iran was far from blind. More critically, signals intelligence revealed chatter between Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy units, indicating that missile boats were preparing to sortie. If they launched now, the swarm might be forced into a defensive posture before the suppression mission was complete. Admiral Harlan made the call, "Initiate ShadowNet." Instantly, the MQ-25 Stingrays switched to low probability of intercept waveforms, piggybacking their communications onto civilian satellite signals. To Iran's sensors, the swarm seemed to vanish, but in reality, it was closing in for the kill. The corvette's commander, seeing his scope clear of hostile drones, ordered his ship toward the gap in the U.S. formation, believing he had broken the swarm. He had no idea that, just 2 miles off his starboard bow, a half-dozen Switchblades were coasting in under radar horizon, guided not by vulnerable data links, but by pre-programmed target profiles uploaded hours before. In war, seconds decide outcomes. By 5:36 a.m. and 50 seconds, those seconds were running out for the Iranian jamming fleet. And here's the question. Was this brilliant U.S. counterstrike inevitable, or did Iran miscalculate by overestimating its electronic warfare edge? Comment below. Was this pure American dominance, or a gamble that just happened to pay off? The air over the Persian Gulf shimmered with heat, but inside the Combat Information Center aboard the USS Theodore Roosevelt, the atmosphere was ice-cold precision. Every screen, every headset carried a fragment of the unfolding engagement, and every officer knew the next 60 seconds could determine whether the United States retained air dominance in the Gulf or ceded a temporary advantage to Iran. At exactly 5:37 a.m., the corvette's jamming signal spiked in amplitude, a desperate attempt to blanket the sky with electromagnetic noise. This surge had a cost. It was now radiating at full power, a perfect beacon for targeting. In modern electronic warfare, the moment you shout loud enough to be heard by your friends, you also make yourself a glowing bullseye to your enemies. Admiral Harlan's voice was calm but final. Tag and drop. From the USS Thomas Hudner, a Standard Missile 6 lifted into the dawn sky, guided not by traditional radar lock but by passive triangulation of the corvette's electronic emissions. This was the Navy's answer to the jamming era. Let the enemy's own signal betray their position. The missile seeker rode the invisible highway of noise, adjusting course until its terminal phase, when it plunged toward the corvette's aft section. The explosion wasn't cinematic, no towering plume, but it shredded the antenna arrays and knocked the ship's jamming suite offline in an instant. Meanwhile, the hardened facility near Bandar Abbas doubled down, narrowing its beam toward the carrier group. This was not just jamming now. It was a direct attempt to blind the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye circling high above, the command and control keystone of the entire operation. For the first time in the engagement, the U.S. network saw momentary data dropouts. Stingray 3, execute wildcard, came the order from Air Boss Control. Wildcard was a maneuver conceived in war games. A Stingray would act as a sacrificial decoy, transmitting high-value target signatures to lure enemy jammers into focusing entirely on it. Stingray 3 climbed sharply, broadcasting a signature indistinguishable from the carrier's own high-bandwidth uplinks. The Bandar Abbas array bit hard, locking on and pouring its full power into smothering the drone. This overcommitment left a fatal gap. Low over the water, Switchblade munitions 6 and 9 skimmed past commercial tankers, using their massive radar cross-sections as moving cover. By the time they emerged, they were less than 4 miles from the shore installation, well inside the point where Iranian surface-to-air systems could track them effectively. At 5:39 a.m. and 25 seconds, both loitering munitions detonated against the jammer's cooling units. Without thermal regulation, the system overheated in under a minute, forcing operators to shut it down or risk permanent damage. The swarm was now unchallenged. But the fight wasn't over. Signals intelligence picked up encrypted Iranian orders to launch 4 Paykop-class missile boats from Bandar Lenga. Their objective was clear: rush the carrier group, while jamming was still believed to be active, fire their newer anti-ship missiles, and withdraw under cover of coastal defenses. Without hesitation, Admiral Harlan ordered the swarm to transition from suppression to interdiction. In tight formation, the MQ-25 Stingrays shifted roles, deploying their remaining switchblades in overlapping intercept patterns. The missile boats, accelerating to 40 knots, entered the engagement zone at 5:40 a.m. What they didn't know was that the US Navy had already repositioned the guided missile destroyer USS Farragut into a flanking position, its AN/SPY-1 radar locked on. The first Paykop fired, its Noor missile streaking low toward the horizon. The moment its booster burned out, the destroyer's Aegis combat system assigned an SM-2 interceptor, which met it in a brief flash mid-air. Simultaneously, Switchblade drones dove at the fast attack craft from multiple vectors, detonating near their waterlines. 2 boats were dead in the water within seconds. The other 2 veered sharply back toward shore, pursued by armed MH-60R Seahawks from the carrier. By 5:42 a.m., the tactical picture had flipped completely. The swarm was intact, the jamming threat neutralized, and Iranian offensive elements either destroyed or retreating. On international channels, Iranian naval units began broadcasting distress calls, a tacit admission of loss, without formally conceding engagement. On the Roosevelt's bridge, Harlan allowed himself a single nod. The engagement had lasted less than 10 minutes from first interference to final retreat, but it had demonstrated something profound. The era when a nation could disrupt U.S. drone warfare with brute force jamming was over. Now the question is, was this overwhelming 3-minute counterstrike the product of inevitable U.S. technological superiority, or a rare moment where preparation met perfect timing? Would Iran have fared differently if they had delayed their strike until American fighters were deeper in hostile range? Tell us in the comments, do you see this as proof of unshakable dominance, or just one battle in a much longer war of adaptation? The Persian Gulf seemed momentarily calm. Iranian boats in retreat, their jammers silenced, and the U.S. Navy swarm orbiting unchallenged above the glittering water. But even as Admiral Harlan reviewed the battle logs, a thin thread of unease crept into the Combat Information Center. At 5:43 a.m., the Electronic Support Measures console lit up again, not with the broad, brute force blasts of earlier jamming, but with something more insidious. A whisper in the spectrum. Lieutenant Commander Ramos frowned. "Admiral, we're picking up low-power bursts on an irregular interval. They're piggybacking on our own drone telemetry." It was a tactic rarely seen outside of classified cyber warfare tests, reverse ghosting. Instead of jamming the drones, someone was listening through the same channels, mapping their handshake protocols in real time. If successful, they could insert false positional data into the swarm's network, causing drones to drift, collide, or even target phantom threats. The source wasn't Iran's navy, nor the coastal facility. It appeared to be coming from over 200 nautical miles away, well beyond Iranian territorial waters. Naval intelligence cross-referenced the bearing, and the answer dropped into the room like a stone. The signal matched the profile of a Chinese Type 815-gram intelligence gathering ship operating under the guise of civilian oceanographic research. It was a geopolitical complication no one wanted. Engaging an Iranian jammer was one thing. Directly confronting a Chinese surveillance vessel risked transforming a regional skirmish into an international incident. But the data flow showed no ambiguity. The vessel was actively exploiting the battle's chaos to probe U.S. drone warfare architecture. Harlan's eyes narrowed. ShadowNet 2. cut and shuffle. Immediately, the swarm's mesh network initiated a cryptographic rekey, forcing every drone to discard its current communication pathway and rebuild it from scratch on a different encrypted set. The Chinese signal dropped, but not before the possibility lingered. How much had they learned in those crucial moments? Then came the second twist, one that neither Iran nor China had engineered. A sudden burst of chatter on regional maritime distress frequencies revealed that one of the Iranian missile boats destroyed earlier had been carrying not only naval crew, but an unacknowledged foreign liaison officer. No flag, no official role, but his recovered identification hinted at Russian origin. It was the kind of revelation that could rewrite the battle's purpose. Had the jamming strike been an Iranian show of defiance, or a field test for Russian electronic warfare algorithms under Gulf conditions? For Admiral Harlan, the operational success now carried a heavier weight. The United States had not just defeated a regional adversary in record time, it had walked straight into a live-fire laboratory where multiple foreign powers had been watching, measuring, and learning. And that raised the real question for our viewers. Was this morning's victory in the Gulf truly a deterrent? Or had it just invited the next, far more dangerous test? Share your thoughts. Are we looking at an ending, or the opening act of a much larger shadow war? The battle that unfolded between 5:32 a.m. and 5:43 a.m. will be studied in war colleges for years, not simply for its speed, but for what it revealed about the future of warfare. In less than 11 minutes, the United States Navy demonstrated that drone swarms, when combined with advanced counterjamming protocols like Specter Shield and decentralized mesh networking, can survive and even thrive under maximum spectrum assault. Tactically, 3 points stand out. First, speed of adaptation. The MQ-25 Stingrays shifted from refueling operations to active electronic warfare support without disrupting the carrier group's broader mission. This kind of role fluidity is rare in manned aviation and marks a decisive advantage in drone warfare. Second, integration of kinetic and electronic assets. The blending of Switchblade, loitering munitions with counterjamming allowed suppression of enemy systems while simultaneously hunting mobile emitters. The Iranian jammers, powerful on paper, became liabilities the moment they had to radiate at maximum power. Third, layered defense under spectrum attack. The US Navy not only countered the jamming but maintained missile defense readiness, as shown in the intercept of the Noor anti-ship missile. This prevented the electronic battle from being exploited as a distraction for a kinetic strike. Strategically, the victory sends a deterrent message to Iran. Brute force electronic warfare will not guarantee an advantage against American naval assets. However, the appearance of the Chinese surveillance vessel and the presence of an apparent Russian liaison on an Iranian missile boat complicate that picture. This engagement was not just a duel with Tehran, it was a broadcast to every rival nation watching a live test of U.S. resilience in the electromagnetic spectrum. And as with any broadcast, those watching were also recording. The Chinese may have harvested enough signal intelligence to model American mesh network behavior. The Russians may have gathered real-world performance data on counterjamming. The geopolitical consequence is clear. While the United States scored an undeniable tactical win, it may have accelerated the learning curves of its strategic competitors. So I ask you, in showing the world how quickly America can turn a defensive moment into an offensive rout, did the U.S. strengthen deterrence, or give its rivals the blueprint they were waiting for? Your opinion matters, tell us below. In the stillness after the battle, the Persian Gulf looked unchanged, the same expanse of water, the same commercial traffic moving along ancient sea lanes. But beneath that surface calm, the balance of power had shifted in ways invisible to the naked eye. Between 5:32 a.m. and 5:43 a.m., the United States Navy had taken the full force of a coordinated electronic warfare strike, absorbed it, adapted, and reversed it in record time. On a purely tactical level, it was flawless. The MQ-25 Stingray swarm never broke, the Switchblade loitering munitions executed with surgical precision, and the carrier group maintained total control of the battle space. Yet, history teaches us that the battles which look perfect on paper often carry unseen costs. The sudden reappearance of a Chinese intelligence-gathering ship and the revelation of a Russian liaison aboard an Iranian missile boat, turned this from a regional skirmish into a global signal event. In a single morning, multiple rival powers were reminded and perhaps reassured that the United States still commands unmatched dominance in drone warfare and spectrum defense. But they also walked away with valuable data on how that dominance operates under stress. For allies, the message is clear. In the narrowest of timelines and the most hostile of environments, America's networked combat power remains unbroken. Carrier Strike Group 9 proved that deterrence is not an abstract doctrine, it is a living, breathing capability that can adapt and strike back in minutes. NATO and partner nations will study this battle, not for what went wrong, but for what went exactly right. For adversaries, the lesson may be more dangerous. Knowing how America wins is the first step in learning how to counter it. Every encrypted handshake, every shift in frequency, every maneuver pattern was a thread in the tapestry of U.S. tactics, and some of those threads may now be in foreign hands. And that brings us to the larger truth. In the 21st century, every victory is also an invitation for the next challenge. Deterrence works only as long as it evolves faster than those it deters. The question is not whether the United States can win in the Gulf again, the question is whether it can stay ahead when the next strike comes from an angle no one expected. Strength deters chaos. Peace demands power. And as this battle proved, power demands constant vigilance. If you believe that understanding these moments is essential, that watching history unfold should make us think, not just cheer, then join us. Subscribe, share this story, and add your voice to the discussion below. Because history is not written by those who look away, it is written by those who pay attention.